make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects, and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, never been banned from Facebook or YouTube, never been sabotaged or censored for politely expressing a difference of opinion. Ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial. Welcome to episode 20 with journalist and author Nick Cohen, someone who is a total hero. I'm hearing more and more, actually. I'm hearing two different perspectives, but that's another story. But I think you're a hero. Like, I've heard some of your recent views on what's going on with the West and the rise of the far right, and I share your concerns. So I just wanted to have a discussion. So thank you very much for coming on to my show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So you've been saying some of the stuff that, I have wanted to say, and I guess I don't have enough of a following to be noticed when I'm saying it. So it's just like when I hear you say it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the clarity that we have been missing from the discussion, because I see a lot of finger pointing, especially now that, Trump is in power, and as hard as it is for me to believe that, it's a lot of, that's because the left caused him to be in power. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about that. What do you think caused Trump to be elected?
Well, there's lots of things, I know. I mean, first of all, there's just boring stuff. Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate.
Right.
She's got so much baggage. Some of it unfair, some of it sexist, some of it conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But, you don't run in an election. There are elections you've just got to win.
Yeah.
Some elections, well, does it really matter if the left-wing candidate or the right-wing candidate wins? Well, in the broader scheme of things, probably not. But when you're up against people like Trump, or I would say Marine Le Pen in France, you've just got to win.
Yeah.
These are, it's not quite Adolf Hitler 1933, but it's sort of comparable. There are times where you've got to pull out every stop. You've got to give yourself the best chance. But the Democrats got caught up in something that's affected the left here in Britain of somehow there is a guaranteed progressive majority. Mm-hmm. So they thought they could run anyone, and Hillary Clinton, the Clinton family got it stitched up, and it turns out, well, no, there isn't a progressive majority.
I mean, I'm probably blind to that same thing, too, because I thought there was no way that anybody, as bad as they could be, could lose to Trump. Like, I just didn't even think it was possible at all. Like, I was ready to be annoyed that it wasn't a landslide. Like, how can we let it get so bad that it's not a landslide win for Hillary? Even though I don't like Hillary, I don't agree with her on everything. But against Trump, I thought that there's just no chance. He's gone around bragging about assaulting women and all sorts of other things.
It was still a bit of a gobsmacker, I have to say. I'm not. But, people, particularly at the moment, tend to hate their opponents. And hatred is a terrible emotion if you want to win. You've got to understand why people aren't voting for you. You've got to understand why your opponents are your opponents. And then you say, well, what can we compromise on? Mm-hmm. And what can't we? And if you start thinking like that, and there are huge problems for liberal left where I am in Europe, everywhere really at the moment. If you start thinking like that, then you've got a better chance of winning. But, you don't go into any election thinking it doesn't matter who our candidate is, or our candidate's got all the power brokers in the Democratic Party behind her. She's scared off other people who might be better, like Joe Biden. It's sewn up. It's Hillary's turn. She's entitled. She lost out in 2008. It's her turn. And it doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about that because we're bound to win whoever the candidate is. That's a disastrous way to think.
Yeah.
That really is a disastrous way to think. I mean, over here, we've got, our left has just gone completely off their heads. And they just think they can have a Labour leadership. Labour is the left-wing party here in Britain who reflects them rather than appeals to the country. And they're going to suffer historic defeats as a result of it. it's almost like people do things out of, not so much Hillary Clinton, but do things out of lifestyle preferences. They think, well, I can buy exactly the type of food I want. I can have it GM-free, organic, locally sourced, vegan. I can buy whatever music I want or listen to whatever music I want on Spotify. Why can't I have the political party that exactly suits my taste? And you can't. Politics is compromise.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think we're all guilty of not, of kind of wishing that whatever politics, that it would actually suit our tastes more. But it is always just compromise because you can't get what you want.
It's a very interesting sort of dialectical tension. Because on the one hand, you never get progress unless people who aren't prepared to compromise on the fringes of political movements make their case. Change, we never got rid of slavery. We never got women's equality or anything if awkward people don't start making a fuss. But as I say, there are times, and I think we're in a time now with the rise of nationalist, authoritarian, illiberal movements across Europe and North America.
Yeah.
Where you've just got to say, first of all, we've just got to beat these people.
Right.
Winning matters. Winning matters more than anything. You've certainly got to win first before you can achieve anything. And I don't think the Democrats did that. I think this is less idealism. It's more the power broking Democratic Party that. American friends to me, I was asking for election, why have you chosen Hillary Clinton? She's not a good candidate. And they said, well, they just think they're going to win whoever they choose, and it's her turn.
Yeah, I guess the danger of that was Trump is such a buffoon. How can anybody just lose against him? So. Yeah,
well, you were saying earlier, Ina, that it's the left's fault. Well, we can talk about that, but I think we ought to say something right up before we go any further of before you start blaming the left or liberals or whatever. If people vote for someone like Donald Trump, that's their responsibility.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? No one held a gun to their heads and made them do it.
This has been it
was their choice.
It's so good to hear you say that because sometimes I feel like I'm in crazy town because nobody's pointing at the obvious. And always looking, and this is what we all got upset about when it happened in regards to Islamism, right? Where you can't hold the Islamists accountable, so then you start looking for other factors and start blaming the West or whatever else.
That's right, yeah.
But it's the same people now trying to do the same thing with Trump voters. It's like, don't blame them. Blame the people who pushed them into this situation. Well, no, I think that there can be a contribution, certainly, from the left to causing this to happen.
We can get onto that, but it's. With Islamism, certainly on the European left, they were making excuses for radical Islamists that the Islamists themselves weren't making. They were so desperate to say, it's all because of Western foreign policy, and then you'd have these theocrats saying, no, we actually believe this.
Yeah.
We believe we're like the early companions of the Prophet. We believe in jihad. We believe in making it impossible for Muslims to live in Western countries. And then you get white Western intellectuals saying, no,
yes.
Don't believe them. Don't believe what they're saying. Believe whatever suits our narrative.
Right. And so now you have Richard Spencer, bringing the Nazis out, and they're just a laughable little group. No one's taking them seriously.
Yeah.
And it's really so much of the same thing. And I find myself caught in the middle, being a liberal ex-Muslim, right? So
it's sort of tough all round, really, isn't it, Ina?
It really is.
Every which way.
You get shit from the Muslim conservatives. You get hated on by the Western left. I don't think there's a very big Muslim left to be your ally.
And the white right wingers hate you as well.
And they hate me as well, and they've become.
Well, actually, those are enemies worth having, Ina. They all hate me too, so that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. You're a comrade.
Thank you. You know what's funny is because I a couple of years ago I used to be very heavily critical of the left, and as you have been as well, right? So people misunderstand that as like you're on the side of the let's always fight the left and only the left, but this has never been my thing. So now. Yeah, exactly. So now when things have shifted politically, you're like, well, no, you need to call out the right, and it's so important that you need to take on these battles But then people are like, well, why aren't you focusing on the left right now? But that's because politics has shifted.
Well, it's not only that, it's quite interesting. So I've thought about this because I get all kinds of accusations. I thought about it quite hard. In that, if you look at, say, Sharia councils in Canada or the UK or whatever, denying rights to Muslim women, you ought to oppose it.
Of course.
Because you believe in universal human rights, and you believe that women's rights are their rights regardless of their skin colour or regardless of their culture. That would once have been an almost indisputable,
of course,
boring thing to say on the left. Over the past 20 years, it's become a thing that's not said or not said enough in most left-wing circles. But you are, when you're saying that because you believe in women's rights and you believe the rights of women are the same wherever they live, regardless of religion or colour or creed or whatever. So that's one way. But of course, there are people on the right who will join with you or be with you in that same criticism, but they're not saying it because they believe in the universal rights of women.
Exactly.
They're saying because they don't like foreigners, they don't like aliens, they don't like people with brown skins, they don't like people of other cultures.
Yeah.
And actually, what's fascinating is Trump is sort of calling them out now.
Well, yeah, he's bringing them to the surface.
Well, no, we're going to see what these people are made of. I mean, I keep saying there's a crisis in conservatism coming. In that, for instance, lots and lots of conservative writers and intellectuals I know have been very good on freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. And you think they believe in freedom of speech. But actually, do they really believe in it? Well, will they speak out as Trump starts attacking the First Amendment that guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of the press in America? Will they shut up and go along with him? Certainly from where I stand, most of those writers I follow seem to be shutting up and going along with them.
Right.
It turns out they don't really believe in free speech. They just want to, champion Charlie Hebdo because it's Islamists who killed them.
Yes. I mean, I don't know where. You're saying all the things that I wish more people would say. So I hope this isn't too boring of an episode, because usually I have a bit of a disagreement with someone on my episodes. But right now, all I can say is...
Come on. Give it your best shot, Ida.
I'm going to maybe pose to you the things I've heard other people say.
Yeah.
So at least there's that.
I mean, how far down the line are people who think of themselves as respectable conservatives who believe in, protections of the US Constitution, say, going to go with Trump? Are they going to say, well, actually, he's hated by the left and we hate the left, so whatever he does, we're okay with? There's a lot of sign of that at the moment. Are people who were all for freedom of speech when it was Salman Rushdie's freedom of speech going to be principled and actually mean what they say? We're seeing a bit of a scandal developing. Quite a few people on the right, certainly here on the British right, of people conservatives abandoning their principles and saying, well, abuses of power are fine as long as they're done by our side.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to watch out for in the next year or so.
And the maddening thing is that this is what they called out on the left. And people like me stood by them saying, yes, you're absolutely right. And that's what we should.
Well, they were right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a difficulty with liberalism, is it shouldn't be a left-right argument.
Yeah.
Particularly, if people, I follow John Stuart Mill, if people are not inciting violence, then they should be free to speak. And you're free to mock them, ridicule them, contradict them, do whatever you want. But certainly in the past 30 years, it has been people who call themselves liberals who have been the most keen to censor and shut up.
Absolutely.
Call it political correctness. It's a rather odd term. It's a rather not odd term. It's a rather tricky term. It's one of those terms you can't really escape from. And I think that has had a very bad effect actually on left-wing causes. And perhaps in a small way, I was saying earlier, it's the people who voted for Trump who are responsible for Trump, but has contributed to the rise of right-wing populism. This thing that people aren't free to speak. You can be arrested. You can be called up before your boss for saying the wrong thing. That has not helped liberal causes in the long run at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I would like to see people call Trump out for asking for a safe space for Mike Pence when he goes to the theater and someone criticizes him, or for...
Very politely.
Yeah. Or for wanting to
exactly.
strip citizenship from people who burn flags, and because these very freedom of speech advocates have been downplaying it, like, oh, he's just trolling, he's just kidding around, he doesn't really mean it, or just writing puff pieces about how he's not really as harmful, or we hope he won't do the things he says he will. But
yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, Anya, isn't it? I mean, Conservatives are now going around saying Donald Trump's okay, you've got to respect him because essentially he's been lying throughout his entire campaign. It's not the greatest advert for a politician you can think of, is it?
Right.
My fear is he hasn't been lying at all.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what he says actually just proves him right. A lot of what he does, I mean, look at the people he's picking to stand alongside him. They're terrifying, almost all of them.
I want to say something quite controversial. You should believe politicians. You should believe people, on the whole.
My goodness.
On the whole, people don't lie about the big things.
Yeah.
So if a politician comes across as a narcissist, an egomaniac, a bully, a buffoon, as Trump has, there might be a reason for that. There might be a reason because that's precisely what he is.
Yeah.
On the whole in politics, people in politics lie about lots of little things, their responsibility for that, why this program's failed or whatever. On the whole, though, just like people you meet in a cafe or whatever, on the whole, they are what they seem to be. On the whole, they're not pretending. And if you meet a man in the cafe and he's shouting his head off and boasting and taking offence at the smallest thing, you don't think, oh, well, he's just putting on that. You think, I want to avoid this guy.
Well, how can you even be asked to take that gamble? Like, how can you be asked to hope that he's lying about everything? It's just,
I know.
You're gambling with a lot. And then how can you simultaneously be upset about the college kids that are thin-skinned, but be okay with the guy with the most power being thin-skinned?
He's a real special snowflake, isn't he?
He absolutely is, but the people that love him are the ones that mock the campus snowflakes, which is mind-boggling.
Well, there is some crossover. I mean, a lot of left-wing writers quite rightly have been pointing out the past few weeks that Trump's politics, Marine Le Pen's politics, Brexit politics here in Britain are a type of identity politics.
Absolutely.
Their white identity, their nationalist. Nationalism is an identity politics.
Yeah.
I am part of the nation. That is part of my identity. I know there's a huge debate going on about this at the moment, and I don't think it's as complicated or as polarized as people are making out. I just think that the problem with campus politics is that type of identity politics plays into the hands of the right because they've got their own identity politics and it's more powerful in a country with a white majority. And these things always end up helping conservative causes, identity politics. They always do. I mean, you must know this as an ex-Muslim.
Yeah.
I mean, if you start saying Muslim identity or Jewish identity or Hindu identity is your crucial identity, more shamefully, if people around you start saying that about you without your consent, then inevitably it's the reactionaries in the religious movement, the conservatives, the most bigoted people say, well, I am the most Muslim, therefore I am the rightful spokesman for this group, or I am most Jewish, or I am most Hindu. Identity politics is not a great way for liberals to do business at all.
Couldn't agree
either
more.
way, either the white right wins or reactionaries in minority communities win.
Yeah, I mean, maybe then you can give me some advice on how to approach this, because I find myself stuck between a rock and a hard place almost all the time now. So here I am criticizing the religion I was born into that has affected my life. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. And
golly, right.
Yeah, so I have seen morality police hit my mother's ankle with a cane for letting her hijab slip in public. I have been to Mecca and been literally herded with a stick by the female morality police women to the women's area. And I do want to oppose this stuff. I do want to oppose forced modesty, but I don't want to play into the hands of the people that do it for the wrong reasons. So at the same time, I'm trying to also oppose far-right people in the West, which includes critics of Islam, unfortunately. So there's been this identity politics that's developed around just critics of Islam. So they have become like the favored group. So we can't call them out because then you're kind of like, how can I put this better?
Well, I mean, you can call them out. You can call out anyone you want to call out. That's the first point. The second point is that there has been this awful failure the past 25 years of, as an immigrant to Canada from an ethnic minority, asserting what for white Canadian women our rights are so unexceptional that basically takes it for granted. The right to use your own intelligence, use your own mind, and give up on the faith of your childhood.
Yeah.
No one. There aren't undercover groups of ex-Catholics.
Right. Exactly.
In North America, there are undercover groups of ex-Anglicans or Jews. It's just, I was brought up in this faith, but I got about 15, 16, and I decided I didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
It's almost uncontroversial thing to say. But, there has been this awful failure of the liberal left to defend people like you and to say, because those are your natural allies.
I wish that they were, but they're not.
You don't expect right-wingers to, on the whole, I mean, some very honourable people on the right, very honourable conservatives, but, you don't expect right-wingers to help immigrants. You don't expect right-wingers to say, hold on a second, that's a denial of her rights, or that's sexism, or that's patriarchy, or that's misogyny. That's kind of the job of the liberal left to do that, and that has been a great, great betrayal of my generation of left wingers, a huge betrayal with consequences which I think are going to unfold for a very, very long time. It's also made them ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, just in their own terms, they're hypocrites, they've got double standards, they're absurd, they look like they don't mean what they say. And they don't understand that darker forces on the right can exploit this.
Yes, like when you have feminists rallying around niqabs being a tool of empowerment. It's absurd to me coming from Saudi Arabia, where I've seen women being beaten for not being modest enough. And to see Western feminists say, well, it's simply a matter of choice. It's like wearing a hat. Well, no, it's really not the same. You don't get caned for choosing not to wear a hat. So at least acknowledge that. We had like this big niqab scandal here in Canada under the Conservative government where a niqabi did not want to remove her face veil for the citizenship oath in court, and they don't allow like face coverings in court, but she won against the federal government. And to me, that was absurd, because if you don't allow any kind of face coverings, that's a pretty simple ask. Like, your face should be visible in court. It's not bigoted. It's not xenophobic. This is how we start to make change, in my mind, if we just lay down these basic values.
Yes.
But then, there were some people on the far right that did exploit that. And so when they see me criticizing the niqab from an actual feminist and liberal perspective, they latch on to my message and use my message and my words. But then when I, have the same kind of criticism for illiberal ideas on the right, they're like, all of a sudden, like, how are you turning on us? I thought that Islam was the only problem, the biggest problem in the world. And, these other things are not a big deal. Like, how can you turn your focus away from Islam if I'm criticizing like the far right? So they've never understood me.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if you're criticising the far right or Trump, you're pretty much criticising them for the same reasons. Yeah. You're criticising reactionary religion. It's not. I don't see why. I mean, people find it hard to take. They find it hard to take. Good. That's not your problem.
But that's everyone almost now. Now I feel like I'm alone. You know what I mean? It's like
you're
me.
You're not alone, I know.
You, me, and 6 other people. That's it.
But just going back to what I was saying earlier, one thing I think the world is changing very, very fast. I mean, Trump is not an isolated example.
Yeah.
We've got people like Nigel Farage and Brexit happening in Britain. You've got Marine Le Pen doing, she could be the next president of France, who knows?
It's terrifying.
You've got these very nationalist authoritarian governments in Hungary, and you've got Putin in Russia, you've got Erdogan in Turkey, you've got the Philippines going again for a very populist nationalist leader, and very brutal. And so one hopes that, or I hope that, there will be a big shake-up in liberal thought.
I really hope so.
And you can't blame, as I said earlier, it's not a question of passing blame, but when the world changes, you have to change with it. And one thing I think people don't realise, particularly in sort of the intellectual left campuses, people behave, they all infight among themselves and they're all claiming who's got greater victim status or whatever. They have very esoteric debates and they don't think that their enemies are watching them, and exploiting them. They talk as if they don't see themselves as others see them. They don't imagine that there's a wider world out there, and that their absurdities, their betrayals of principle, will be used against them. So even if there's certainly a very moral case for them behaving better, as you well know from your own experience. There's also just a practical political case of you don't give ammunition to your enemies.
Yeah, but what if they don't, what if they're not considered enemies, right? Like, so many so-called rationalists are promoting fake news conspiracy websites. How is that happening? I don't understand,
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't understand that side.
And
what type of things are they promoting?
Well, this InfoWars website, like, he's like a Trump supporting, like he thinks.
Oh, yeah.
Alex Jones, Paul Joseph Watson, his British friend. They're crazy. They're absolutely nuts.
I don't know how you could possibly imagine people like were ever rationalists.
Well, no, they aren't. But you see some pretty prominent, like, atheist, anti-regressive left types promoting this as a good alternative to mainstream media. This is absurd. These are people who think the Illuminati is controlling the music industry and chemtrails, and it's like, I don't even know where to begin.
So their distaste of the regressive left has pushed them into the hands of the regressive right.
Right, which to me is worse, kind of.
Well, I mean, they sound like the type of fools who are just waiting for a con man to catch them. If it wasn't one, it would be the other. They'll probably all be going back the other way in 5 years' time.
Well, I really hope you're right, because right now it seems to be okay to, like Nigel Farage himself, who was concerned about migrants being rapists or molesting women, but then when confronted with Trump bragging about assaulting women, he completely downplayed it. So how can you be concerned about actual women and downplay it on one side, but then overgeneralize it on the other side? Either it's not women that you're concerned about, it's just your side winning that you want. So, this alt-right stuff, I don't know how much you've been following, but there's a legitimate rise of the male rights activists, and they're not really what they sound to be. They're not just working for male rights. The more prominent ones, like some of them are like rape deniers, like marriage equals consent, so there's no such thing as marital rape, or... Well,
in which case they're just like a Saudi Arabian clergyman, aren't they?
Exactly, but how is it okay to oppose the Saudi clergyman and promote this guy on your show at the same time? This is what boggles my mind.
It's not okay, and, just as you shouldn't have anything to do with Saudi clergymen or academics in universities who make excuses, and nor should you have anything to do with right-wingers. As I say, you oppose them both with the same ferocity and for the same reasons. I mean, in the end, with extremists of all sorts at the moment, the similarities between them are far more telling than the differences. I mean, have you noticed how everyone seems to love Putin? So you've got Trump, you've got Marine Le Pen, who's actually taking Putin's money, you've got Farage. They all love Putin's Russia. At the same time, you've got Jill Stein, the American Green candidate, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, and what is it that binds them all together? Why do they all like him? They like him because he's against democracy. They like him because he's willing to just send troops in and upset the international order. It's almost like they just like the thrill of it. It's like people going along with... some violent man in a bar or something. Isn't it great? Look at the way he's punching people. Yeah,
well, that's kind of why a lot of people seem to like Trump, too. They don't claim to like his values or beliefs or the things he says, but it's just the thrill of shaking things up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think what's going to be, I feel this very strongly here in Britain, is until now, populists, for want of a better word, the Trumps, the Nigel Farages, the Jeremy Corbyns, Marine Le Pens have had a very useful political advantage. They've never been in power. They've got clean hands. They can make all kinds of accusations against people in power, most of them made up. But, no one can just turn around to them and say, well, look at your record. You've done this, you've done that, because they haven't been in government. Mm-hmm. Now we've got Brexit happening in Britain. The Americans have got, or will have in January, President Trump. And these people are going to go into, these things are happening, and they're inevitably going to lead to all kinds of disappointments and failures and compromises. So what happens then? Do the Trumps and the Farages hold their hand up, take responsibility? Do they say, well, actually, we lied to you? I don't think that's likely at all. I think they will double down. And I think things are going to get an awful lot nastier. And they will start developing conspiracy theories to explain away their own failures. They'll start looking for scapegoats to blame. I think we're in for a very, very rocky period now.
And I think it distracts from the actual self-critique, like how I was saying that I was much happier to criticize the left when there wasn't these conversations about do different races have different IQs being perceived as legitimate conversations among the people around me. Now I feel like really threatened by those conversations, and I can't focus on criticizing the left for I don't know.
I mean, increasingly, the left just doesn't matter anywhere in the developed world. In Europe now, where it used to be normal to have a centre-left government, around 2000, most countries in Europe had one, or if there was a Conservative government, there was a reasonable expectation that the left would replace in the next election. In Europe now, there are only 3 out of 30 countries where a left-wing party polls more than 35% of the vote, and one of those is Malta, which is so tiny it barely doesn't count. The left is ceasing to be important,
which is terrifying, though. Why is that happening?
Well, increasingly it's turning into countries have one party that's sort of neoliberal globalist type of conservatives, another party that's nationalist authoritarian. And that seems to be the division in politics. I do wish, I'm not going to go on about it, but I do wish, your generation of liberals and leftists, when they're confronted with people who start having racial theories of intelligence, or when you marry a woman, you possess her and you can do what you want to her. Yeah. The problem that political correctness has done is that they've lost the ability to argue. They're so used to just saying people can't think that, they're banned, or actually people who don't even begin to think anything like that are still banned. They're all so used to no platforming or calling the police to say, well, so-and-so said something wrong. They've lost the ability to fight and win arguments. Mm-hmm. That's very, very dangerous. I've always said, if you have to call the police to take on an extreme right wing and say, oh, well, arrest him, that's saying you can't beat him in argument. That's saying the extreme right wing, that's sort of giving it an unearned and unwarranted dignity to its argument. Mm-hmm. Well, frankly, if you can't beat an extreme right winger in argument, you ought to step down and make way for someone who can. It shouldn't be that hard. It isn't that hard. But when you have people in very siloed cultures who are just not used to taking these things on, then you allow them to foster and to grow, and you don't have the arguments to beat them.
That and the singular focus on the one topic, right? Even within subcultures, I know atheists don't rally around the same thing all the time, so there's different subcultures even within that. But in the community that I at least have access to online, there has been a very singular focus on Islam, and I'm happy to prioritize that is definitely one of the bigger problems of today. But when it gets to the point that you can't, I can't criticize Christianity because then people will hate on me immediately, say you're some kind of secret Islamist or Islam apologist. Why are you saying this about Christianity, and why not Islam? I spend 95% of my time talking about Islam, but one day I'm going to talk about Christianity, and I want to have the freedom to do so. So I think that singular focus mentality is also a bit dangerous, where it becomes okay to ally with anyone who's anti-Islam. And those anti-Islam people can include some very illiberal and dangerous people.
Yeah, well, outright fascists, some of them. No, it's very odd, because you get this here in Britain as well. You keep getting people saying, well, you do understand, Nick, that secularism and liberalism come from Christianity. And I say, well, to an extent. But the reason they are here was the Enlightenment beat the living daylights out of Christianity.
Yeah.
They're there because people fought for them. And they say, no, you're not meant to say that. You're meant to think that somehow, even though Christianity is collapsing in Britain, really, that somehow, if you want to be a secularist, you're sort of a Christian as well. And you think, well, that's not true. What? That's not how it happens. That's not how it happened in history. That's not how it works now. But yes, I take your point about that. And again, we will see how again, part of the Trump success will be he will try and appoint judges to the Supreme Court who will be opposed to abortion on theocratic grounds, essentially. Will they be attacked with the same venom? Of course
they're not. Actually, people who attack them or try to discredit them rightly are attacked instead. And that's what's upsetting to me, is that there are some more immediate dangers, like to the West itself. And that is this kind of rise of far-right politics, and people are going to immediately run and say that I'm equating Islam and jihad with Nazis, who are, smaller in number and not really doing anything right now. But that's not at all what I'm doing. All I'm saying is that this threat becomes more immediate to the West because it's happening in the West. Whereas, jihadis will have the occasional attack, but they're not in government. Like some people started tweeting about how, you think Trump is bad, but Muhammad was way worse. And I'm no fan of Muhammad. I mean, hence the ex-Muslim. But he's not running for election.
Well, yes, exactly.
He's also from the 7th century. He's not current day.
I mean, it's like there's a big and rather pointless argument going on now about Trump, about Orban in Hungary, about Poland, about Marine Le Pen. And people saying, well, look, Nick, they're not actually Nazis. And I say, fine, yes, of course they're not. But that's setting the bar really very low.
Really,
if you're saying you cannot criticize a reactionary movement until they start invading all their neighboring countries and sending people to gas camps. So somehow, that is 99.9% of all political debate and all political argument ban. No, they're not Nazis, but there's an awful lot wrong with them. And they're probably going to get worse for the reason I said earlier. They will get worse because they will not accept responsibilities for the lies they've told and for the failures of their simplistic and often foolish policies. They will not accept it, and they will look for victims to blame. They'll look for scapegoats. They'll invent conspiracies. I mean, this is only just beginning, I think, both in Britain and America.
Yeah, I'm scared of.
There'll be, the stab in the back conspiracy. This is what happens after the Germans lose the First World War. The German army, which has been comprehensively defeated on the battlefield, its generals and right-wing politicians in Germany refused to accept they lost. They were stabbed in the back by the socialists, by the liberals, by the Jews, and the stab in the back conspiracy then goes on to fuel Hitler and the Nazis. I think there's going to be all kinds of stab in the back conspiracies about Brexit, because Brexit is, contrary to what the British people were promised, is going to be hugely complicated and miserable and difficult, and is going to cost people money and jobs. And of course, no one said at the time, and they will invent new enemies to blame it on. And I think the Trump presidency is going to be marked. Those people in the Midwest who voted for Trump because they thought he was going to bring them more jobs, will, when more jobs don't come, more when their healthcare gets worse rather than better. Trump is not going to say, "Oh hell, I lied to you, or I was over optimistic." He is going to find someone else to blame.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, which is why I keep going back to there's a crisis in conservatism. In that, conservatives used to be the small c conservatives used to be one who always used to say quite rightly, you know what? People must accept responsibility for their own actions.
Yes.
Which is not even it's a very small c conservative thing to say, but that's true. In the end, you are accountable for what you do. But Conservatives are very good at saying that about poor people on welfare, but they're not so good at saying it about themselves. They really aren't. And they will come up with every variety of voodoo history and conspiracy theory to wiggle away from the consequences of what they've done.
Right. And it's funny to me that, I've seen comments floating around calling you a regressive leftist, a social justice warrior.
It's the first time I've been called that.
Yeah, you should check out the comment sections after you do interviews. They're quite amusing. Or maybe you shouldn't for your own.
No, I'm a journalist on the Guardian Observer here in London. The first rule of all journalists is never read the comments section.
Right, yes.
That way madness lies, I know.
Yes, I know. I should not do it myself, but...
Yeah, stop it at once.
I'll try my best.
It's good for your mental health to keep away from those places.
It's so true. They're
you get
dark.
a very dark view of humanity if you go down there.
Yeah. YouTube comments are especially like the darkest corners of humanity. I don't know what's so special about YouTube, but YouTube seems to bring it out. But yeah, that's the thing. Like I for someone who's criticized the left a lot, for you to be called a regressive leftist or a social justice warrior simply because you want to call out the rise of the far right is just, I can't wrap my head around it because
I've been called most things in my time. I've never been called that before, but I'm sure I better get used to it.
Well, this is the new thing. This is the new thing now because you're concerned about the right. So that's what you'll be called.
But all I'm doing is arguing for liberal, consistent values. I mean, that's all. And it seems to be sort of, you have to explain yourself for, hours on end to just say, look, I am against Sharia councils denying rights to women. Yeah. I am also against Donald Trump doing the same thing with what he said on abortion. Why is that even a problem? Why is anyone remotely confused about that? I'm in favour of freedom of speech for Salman Rushdie and Charlie Hebdo. I'm also in favour of freedom of speech for the Washington Post and the New York Times. Mm-hmm. Again, why is that even difficult?
Because people like to pick teams.
Shouldn't you be surprised if I wasn't? Yeah, that would be difficult if I wasn't.
Yeah, except people would probably find that more comforting because you've just picked a team and you're just going along with it. And that's the tribalism. That is the problem. Like, I don't think I fall into that as much because I am attacked from everywhere. So it's very hard for me to even pick a team if I wanted to because no team wants me.
We have no natural home, I know.
Yes, no team wants me. So I can't pick a team. So that's why...
Well, that's not good for the political health of your society.
No, not at all.
Because there ought to be a strong liberalism in Canada that says, obviously, a young Saudi woman here.
I'm actually Pakistani who grew up in Saudi, but yes.
Forgive me, sorry.
Never mind, sorry. It's okay.
A young Pakistani woman in Canada who rejects theocracy, rejects misogyny. Obviously, she's going to find a welcome home among us. So it's not good for your society. It's good for you as a writer and a journalist, though, not to have a natural home, not to have a team. Yeah. Because that way you write more freely.
Yeah.
This is a small consolation as our world goes up in flames around us, but it's good for your writing.
Yes. It's so good to talk to someone else who completely is on the same page because it's so rare for me to at least experience that. I've almost not experienced that as much as I do watching your recent interviews at all. So, I mean, people have been telling me what a hero you are or what a regressive leftist you are.
No, just stay with the ones who say what a hero I am. Forget about the others.
Yeah, and I fear
that nobody's. You don't want to waste your time with them, Ina.
No, I try not to. Trust me, but the extreme people always have a way of being the loudest. And I keep being bounced between the left that thinks everything is white supremacist, and I'm a white supremacist.
There's a wonderful, she's not ex-Muslim, she's Muslim, she's a liberal Muslim woman in Britain, called Sarah Khan, who's been campaigning to try and stop radicalisation in British Asian communities.
Yeah,
and she's explaining what she does at some meeting, and two white women white leftists accuse her of being an Islamophobe.
Yeah,
and Sarah says, well, hold on a second. One, I am Muslim. Two, actual Islamophobes, from the extreme white right in Britain, threaten me. And now, at the same time, I'm attacked by you just because I'm making not difficult argument, but a principled argument.
Right. This is why I stay away from the term Islamophobia, because it's just, I feel like, why can't I be disapproving of Islam? It's anti-Muslim bigotry.
It's got a pretty disgraceful history. Islamophobe is a term.
Yeah. Because
it comes up with Khomeini and the Iranian Revolution in '79. And it just means any criticism of Islam.
Right. So,
I much prefer the phrase anti-Muslim bigotry.
Exactly.
Which a lot of those conservatives you were talking about are anti-Muslim bigots.
Yeah.
They're not against repressive religious laws because they're repressive, or indeed they're religious. They're against all Muslims because they're Muslims, and because they're foreigners, and because they have a different skin colour. So, I mean, anti-Muslim bigotry is it's a more accurate term as well. And it doesn't have this very dubious.
Well, that's the thing, right? People who are anti-feminist usually and say pretty sexist things on the internet will join me when I'm opposing sexism in Saudi or misogyny in Saudi and say they're really concerned for women's rights in Saudi Arabia, but it's very hard for me to buy that when they're harassing Maryam Namazi on Twitter, and
why harassing Marianne?
There's just so much politics. For so many reasons, people harass her.
I love Marianne. She's one of my heroes.
She's lovely, yeah. I mean, I don't always agree with her, but I have a ton of respect for her.
She's also tougher than a steel girder as well.
She really is. She absolutely is. But, I mean, people like, say, Tommy Robinson, he was making fun of her doing a nude protest, and just like,
look, Tommy Robinson's from an extreme right wing organisation in Britain.
Well, that's so funny because
I know you shouldn't worry about disagreeing with someone like that,
but I'm shamed for it, though. I am shamed.
You should worry about agreeing with them, frankly.
That's what I say. But then
you shouldn't worry if the leader of the English Defence League is on the other side to you, or you look at what he's writing and think, my God, this man is a stunning hypocrite, liar, and fool. Yeah, I mean, that is a perfectly reasonable thing to think.
But you see, he's being promoted by some pretty influential people, and that's the trouble. He's being promoted as a not far right person, as a person with liberal ideas who's just been, misrepresented by the mainstream media, and this is a problem. I was actually an advocate for Tommy a couple of years ago because I did see hope when he left the EDL and joined Quilliam. I was like, there's hope for this guy. Maybe he just went down a wrong path, and I'm going to reach out and extend a hand of friendship to him because I want him to see that, even as someone from a Muslim background, I can sympathize with whatever he's experienced. So if he's going down that path of becoming less extreme, then great, power to him. But he proved me wrong completely. He went and formed Pegida and retweets white rights accounts and talks about white genocide. And he's worse than how I perceived him to be before. So I can't be an advocate for him anymore. But now I'm being told that, well, no, he's the real liberal. So...
Yeah, well, I mean, that is so clearly nonsense. It ought to be beneath your contempt.
Well, these are people who have far more influence than me, so it's unfortunately that's the more popular view.
Well, I think you should build your influence, build the legend.
I try, but people are easily upset by me because I don't pick a team. This is the problem.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: you've got to. And I would say this to listeners of yours who are agreeing with you, and you've got to expect it to be a struggle.
Oh yeah, I do.
You shouldn't expect you come out to something which is truthful and right and principled. For people all around you to suddenly start, people who've been opposing you suddenly go, oh, you know what, the scales have fallen from my eyes. I've just listened to Ina, and you know what, I've been wrong all this time, and she is absolutely right. It just doesn't work like this. I would say this, though. I do think that we are going through such a crisis, and so many old assumptions are being thrown up in the air, including the assumption of, is there still such a thing as the West? You know? Because the West was this place of sanctuary where you could go to escape, whatever, religious persecution or what have you. Is that still the safe place it once was? All these assumptions being thrown up in the air.
Yeah.
And you cannot, whatever happens historically, people's preconceptions, people's opinions are going to have to change to meet a new reality. It would be astonishing if people just carried on as the way before. I'm not saying that what will come in future will be better. It may be worse. But some of the people who you feel in the middle class social justice warrior university left in Canada have so let you and people like you down. You would hope they would change, or at least start thinking again, rather than just doubling down on what they've been doing for the past decade. Yeah,
I mean, what would it take, though? I don't know. I feel like, in some sense, Trump can unify the left, because then there's this new focus, and everybody can see that is a problem. At least on the left, most people can see that Trump is a problem. And if that's not unifying, if that doesn't bring out your inner liberal, then I don't know what will.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, in America, they seem to be all over the place at the moment. We'll see.
Yeah. It's funny. I interviewed a conservative Muslim Trump supporter, and
wow.
Yeah, she was a very interesting person to talk to, but she didn't pretend to be liberal in any way. She really liked Trump because of his views on abortion and LGBT. So because she didn't like other people having those rights, she was okay overlooking Trump's stances kind of on Muslims and hoping...
This is what's been so weird about the past couple of decades. I know there are reasons for it, protecting my race and whatever, but, if I were to show you an article defending a movement that wanted to subjugate women, kill homosexuals, kill Jews, kill any Muslim who of his or her own free will decided to abandon their religion or change their religion, and say, look, Ina, here's this piece. I want you to guess what type of paper it's from, what type of newspaper it's from. You would say, well, obviously, Nick, that's from a left-wing newspaper, not a right-wing newspaper. And we're so used to that, we don't think just how utterly weird it is. So obviously, religious conservatives are going to quite like candidates who are, against abortion, against women's rights, against homosexuality. That is a normal right-wing thing to happen. Yeah. What's been so odd about the past generation is, if you like, left and right have been standing on their heads.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, and I'm being far too optimistic for my own good, and you'll probably throw these words back in my face in a year or so's time. I just hope that some people just start to change a bit now because of the scale of the crisis that's upon us.
I really hope so. I mean, I can already predict that you've probably upset some of the listeners by saying that what did you say? Christianity was dismantling the UK?
The point I was making was, you were saying, you're told off for attacking Christianity.
Yeah.
And I was saying there's this story around, which is everywhere really, that we are liberal, we are secular because of our Christian heritage. And the point I made is, well, look, the reason we are secular and liberal is that the Enlightenment beat the living daylights out of Christianity. It stopped it being theocratic. It stopped people having to pay money to the church, come what may. It stopped people being tortured to death for being heretics. These things were fought over.
Yeah.
And the only reason Christianity, and to a lesser extent Judaism, are basically civilized at the moment is they were made to be.
Yeah.
People force. So
that's despite Christianity, not because.
Well, it's despite the theocratic elements of Christianity and Judaism. There are there always were liberal Christians and liberal Jews, just so are liberal Muslims now. But the notion that this was not a painful and political process and struggle is just historically absurd.
Right, but why mention it at all is what some people would say, right? Why focus on that? Why bring it up? Why not only focus on jihad and Islam?
Well, I think people should focus on jihad and Islam if that is what's threatening. But the reason you are, to go back to universal principles, is the reason you are against them is that you believe in secularism. You don't believe in anyone claiming a divine mandate to oppress or to censor or to have, in your case, some kind of inquisition into whether you have the right as an adult woman to change your faith or leave your faith. And when you see, again, people using divine mandates to restrict other people's rights, you attack those too, whether they are Christians, whether they're Jews, whether they're Hindus.
Right, it's just
being
consistency. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know why people are upset by it. Well,
I mean, I think what they are upset by is, are they opposed to Islamism, as they say they are, or are they really just anti-Muslim bigots?
Right. It's your whole principled thing, right? Are you principled in not latching onto something simply because it's anti-Islam, just like how you want the left to be principled to not latch onto something simply because it's anti-West, which is what the left does with Islamists, right? So if we can criticize that, then we can criticize this in the same way. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to follow this through consistently. It's
not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. Yeah, you should be able to do it in your sleep soon, Ina.
Yeah, I hope so. Without being, beaten down on Twitter. But yeah, that's the perils of...
The mute button is a wonderful invention.
It really is. But freedom of speech, Nick, what kind of... No, I'm just kidding. But that's what I get thrown at me all the time. That I can't mute or block or curate my content in any way because then I'm an enemy of freedom of speech.
No. You'd be an enemy of freedom of speech if people who disagreed with you sent a squad of trained hitmen round to take them out. That's being against freedom of speech.
Or try to pass a law.
Yeah, freedom of speech. There is no right under freedom of speech that means you have to listen to idiots.
Right. So where do you fall on this?
You to listen to idiots.
On this Milo Yiannopoulos being banned from Twitter thing, because
it's up to Twitter who it has or has on.
Right. That's what I think too. It's their product.
Twitter's just a private company. He's under no obligation to have me, you, or anyone else on. If I start whipping up online hate groups to attack you or someone else, then Twitter's perfectly entitled to say, well, we don't want you here.
Yeah.
His freedom of speech hasn't been taken away.
I think people don't understand freedom of speech. They seem to conflate it with freedom from criticism, like people did this with the Trump voters as well. They called it vote shaming. So it's a strange term. Like, you can't hold them accountable for people that they voted for. Like, don't judge them on their choice to vote for Trump. Why?
You're so right on that. You're so right on that. It is, because the argument for freedom of speech is simply that as long as you're not inciting violence, as long as you're not inciting people to break the law, burn someone's house down, beat them up, you're free to say what you want. But that does not mean that people who listen to you aren't equally free to criticize you, attack you, mock you, ridicule you, satirize you. That's what a free society is.
Right.
But there is this really weird thing that people think that as soon as someone criticizes them, they're infringing they're shaming me, they're infringing my right to free speech. No, absolutely. Freedom of speech is the freedom to criticize.
Yeah. I
can't think of a better or more succinct definition of it.
Yeah. Right. That's why we fight for freedom from religion as well. But
yeah.
Nick, I'm afraid I haven't been able to disagree with you at all.
That's all right. It doesn't bother me at all. Makes a very pleasant change.
Yeah, for me too. Well, thank you so much again.
Well, it's been very kind of you. Thank you for having me.
And I hope you don't get hate tweets from this. I hate to be the reason that other people are hated on. I'm pretty sure, though, that you will upset some people with your comments about the right.
Well, I'm used to it.
Okay, yeah, you can handle it. Well, take care, and everybody go buy Nick's books because he is awesome, as you guys just heard. Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/Nice Mangoes. No E in mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter @Nice Mangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal. nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no E in mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too. A special thanks to Dylan Beck for theme music, sound, and production help.